So what I'd like to conclude with is by asking you to think for a moment, if you were that old geezer, except young, as a freshman, coming here during the Taft administration, 100 years ago, the world around you would be a model of progress, unbelievable technological progress. It's true it's not Google and the internet and all of that, but it was the airplane, it was the telegraph, it was the automobile, it was the telephone, unheard of progress. Unbelievable economic growth. I don't know the statistics exactly, but I think world economy grew at something like twice the rate in the 30 years before World War I as it had in the previous 100. Huge expansion of world trade, and a very long period of peace among the major powers. Arguably, the last major war had been the Franco-Prussian War in Europe 40 years earlier. Some people even thought that war was obsolete, that modern economics meant that people would realize it just wasn't worth it to fight. There was a journalist named Norman Angell who wrote a book called The Great Illusion, and the illusion that he meant was the illusion that war pays. And he thought that he had demonstrated successfully that war couldn't pay. He had to pay to get the first edition out, 5,000 copies, and it took off like wildfire. I think it sold 7 million, which at that time was unheard of. Well, it might have been nice, except in 1914, a crisis that started in the Balkans, of all places, got out of hand, and before you knew it, you had World War I, which was, up until that time, the bloodiest war in history. It was a catastrophe all by itself, destroyed whole generations of Europeans, and I think 200,000 Americans were killed, although we entered that war late. But the catastrophe didn't end with World War I. World War I helped to produce Bolshevism and communism in what became the Soviet Union, which was a tragedy by itself. It helped to produce fascism in Germany and Italy, which were also tragedies by themselves. Maoism in China, which was maybe 70 million people died as a result. And then, of course, World War II, which made World War I no longer the bloodiest war in history. And when we got through all of that, we still had the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis and all of the things that led to that. So the 20th century, which started out with such great promise, ended up as the bloodiest century in history. We cannot afford to do that a second time. If it happens in this century, I don't want to imagine what it would be like, but it doesn't have to happen. I think an important part of preventing it from happening is for the U.S. to remain engaged, actively engaged. There's no magic formula for what you do in particular situations. But one thing I can say for sure, if you say it's none of our business, let the world take care of itself, it's not going to take care of itself well. We may not be perfect, we may make mistakes, but I think the chances are better if we remain involved. So I hope that our present generation of leaders, and your generation as you become leaders, will have the wisdom to see that our best chance to preserve a peaceful and prosperous world is for the U.S. to stay engaged, to remain a leader, not necessarily the dominant power, but still, I think, the essential and perhaps in many ways the most important power. Thank you very much.